Well, I hope you guys are enjoying this class as much as we are. Sam and I put together a little presentation for you. So we are going to be talking about social welfare policy, the most exciting topic in the world. So for our presentation, we have a little outline here. We're going to talk about social welfare policy and our specific policy. We're going to talk about the goals of our policy, the stated goals and the unstated goals. We're also going to talk about outcomes and the goals of the policy. We're going to talk about some consequences of our policy, some economic issues. We're going to discuss some current policy reform proposals, and we're going to discuss how this policy supports human rights and if it does in fact support human rights. Okay, so what is social welfare policy? Well, it's very tricky and very difficult to define. Um, our text gave a pretty good definition, which I think is a great working definition. And it can be defined as the disciplined intellectual study of many responses to public problems. Therefore, social welfare policies are birthed from a collective cry from the public to fix a social problem. Um, the policy that we chose was the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act of 1996, or the PRWORA. Try to say that fast 10 times. It's a real tongue twister. We're going to stick with PRWORA. Okay, so some of the goals of our policy. Um, this was really about reforming the current welfare system by getting families the benefits that they need, such as food, childcare, housing, and at the same time provide adults with job training and education so they could eventually get off of welfare. Um, we also sought to reduce recidivism or return of clients or participants to the rolls, and we also was hoping to lessen consumer dependency on welfare. Um, the original theory behind this program, which eventually incorporated TANF, was to give individuals the needed skills to obtain employment, which would help lessen the numbers of individuals on the rolls, and at the same time, help raise children out of a deep place of poverty, which was kind of the main goal here. Okay, so we have some of the research that we found shows a very broad flexibility to determine eligibility, and there's quite a variety here. And there were also some racial disparities. Um, Actually, our picture is blocking the state, but New York State is shown on the graph here, and the data is quite clear. Prior to TANF, there was another program called the AFDC, or the Aid for Families with Dependable Children, and that actually provided more benefits for recipients than the current program. And then lastly, employment rates among those who left welfare increased significantly, with many states reporting that a substantial portion of former recipients were employed within months of exiting the program. However, even though they were employed, they weren't making enough money to permanently stay off the social welfare rolls, but also that continue to increase the poverty level. Okay, now we're going to talk about some of the unintended consequences of this policy. One of the most significant unintended consequences of the PRWRA was a dramatic rise in extreme poverty among families with children, which again, this is a huge contradiction because this is what the policy stated it was going to do. Um, when the PRW ORA was put into place during the Clinton administration, that was the big political slogan, which was going to be to lift children out of poverty and to get participants off the rolls. Um, Unfortunately, you're going to see through our presentation that this doesn't really happen. There was a reduction in cash assistance, but the distribution was quite unfair, and there were a lot of negative effects that shifted this to a huge dependency on the benefits. Just a little note here, we had prior to the PRWRA, there was a program called the AFDC that I mentioned before, and this really helped the families out, and it was, I think, a much better program. So one of the things we want to talk about here is the economic impact of this policy. Um, there was we're having a lot of fun tonight. Our kids are joining us in this presentation, and at this point, we're just going to keep them here because we love them so much.
And that's what
Um,
social workers do,
and
right?
that's what social workers do, give up their life for their children. We have a really cool graph here, which I actually think gets at the heart of this policy. In 1996, during the AFDC, there were 68 out of 100 families that were receiving benefits. And then in 2014, which is during the PRWRA, we had only 23 out of every 100 families. This is a huge amount. And now we're talking about millions of families that cannot receive benefits that need them. One of the biggest things here was that TANF talks about being cost effective and it's dropping participants' rates, but they're not really helping the families out. And this another indicator is that TANF's benefit levels were often too low to lift families out of poverty. Yep. And then we have a few proposals for policy reform. We propose that in order to reduce or really reform welfare, some major change needs to happen, including more foresight into the future. We can't just simply focus on current crisis and trying to provide a temporary solution to problems, but we need to consider long-term solutions to the root causes that these people in need have, such as unemployment, lack of shelter, food, or health insurance. It really doesn't do any justice to provide work, job training assistance, and not actually have any jobs in the economy that the individuals can obtain. So TANF really sounds good on paper, but it's not helpful in practice with regards to getting people jobs after the 2-year program or reducing childhood poverty. And we felt that that was really kind of the core issue.
All right. And then we have the next slide, which is the support of human rights, where we're going to talk about human rights and how it relates to our policy. So we chose Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution. A lot of the data that we saw showed that the number of poor children is rising. So we took that into consideration when we chose one of the articles. So the article that we chose, it states that Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. So that's where we got this is where we related the article to because of the whole general welfare aspect and how it relates to the PRWORA. Is because it supports the human rights of social welfare benefits. But we also go into detail and we talk about how it doesn't provide for the basic human rights of many poor children, like the AFDC previously did. After the implementation of TANF, coverage drastically dropped and millions of families who previously relied on cash assistance found themselves without adequate support. With that being said, we're in favor of the goals of the PRWORA, but not in favor of the actual results of the implementation of this policy because they fail to do, like Josh said, what they're supposed to be doing, which is reducing childhood poverty and providing for needy families. And then we just we wanted to end our presentation with, if you know somebody that needs help or finding help, maybe someone you know, people you're going to be working with in your local community, you can always call 211 or visit this website we have below. And we look forward to hearing your guys' responses, feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. You guys are in such big trouble.